Yo, what's going on everybody? AA Brian here and welcome back to PanNerdia and welcome back to another Let's Paint. This week we'll be painting Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop, focusing on the figure, form, as well as a technique known as foreshortening. So let's get our materials. We'll start off with a 24 by 18 inch canvas. Be sure to tone it gray as to use gray later to erase out sketch lines and whatnot. It really helps, as well as help us bring out the highlights and shadows in the painting later. Speaking of paint, we need acrylic paints, titanium white, Mars black, cadmium orange, burnt umber, chrome yellow, bright red, phthalo blue, light green, and bright aqua green. Now if you can't find that bright aqua green, don't worry, we'll be alright. As far as brushes go, we'll use a round 0, a round 2, a flat 5, and a flat 10. As well as some water for those brushes to clean them off and some paper towels to clean off the damp brushes. Alright, so starting with the sketch here, we'll grab one of our round brushes, 0 or 2 will work. Some white paint. We'll begin about 2 inches in from the top left corner on both sides. Drop down, make the curve of the top of the head as well as the almost V shape of the jaw. You can kind of skew it a little bit to the right there. Throw in a real quick little outline of the hair as well, just scribble it in. Alright, we'll kind of bring the neck down past the jaw here, a little straight line with a slight curve towards the bottom. Go ahead and add a 45-degree angle towards the left side of the canvas, and then just before the left edge, go ahead and bring down another 45, heading inward toward the canvas. Now we are doing foreshortening, which means exaggerated features. Alright, you see it a lot in anime and manga. We're bringing that right forearm and hand towards the viewer, so it'll be stouter there. You'll connect it in about let's say 1.5 inches from the back of the arm to where that bicep is. Alright, I'm bringing in some lines here, sketching in some lines of clothing ripples on the jacket, kind of lend to that foreshortening, and then jump it up here to the collar, bringing out some quick swoops from that back left side of the head there. We'll just kind of map out where we want the hand come in. Again, it's going to be very exaggerated. You can bring down a line from the wrist about as long as the forearm line there, and then one over to the right. Come back and add a couple more little clothing marks for the arm there, and then bring down a sharp angle in towards the center of the canvas there. So we're about halfway through the bicep, center of the canvas. Drop down about 2 inches and then do another angle at the same angle there, down, and then that'll be the back of his leg. Remember, you can always use gray paint to clean up any of these areas that are using with the white paint. Think of it as like an eraser. You can even help shape the jaw, reshape the hair and whatnot. Remember, always use a little water with your white paint too. That'll really help. Jump about 3.5, 4 inches or so up from the back line where it's meeting his arm, up to where the chest is, and add that line there, and then bring down for the waist as well. Again, we're just using some gray paint to help correct some things, but we'll jump over here to this other arm. Now think of that arm connecting to that arm in the foreground, right? Think about how it curves back. Kind of think about how we did the Nimbus cloud last week, how it just kind of swoops back, right? So it's going to get tighter back there. The arm's going to be small. As we jump into the chest here, we're going to start marking down where his blazer, his futuristic blazer is for Spike. He's got that big collar there. We'll paint that wedge up. And then we'll go down and establish where the bottom of the blazer is and then where it connects to the legs. We're also going to bring a leg up here and a high knee for his left leg there. It's going to be a pretty steep shot up about chest level and then back down right to about where his crotch is at for that shoe. We'll sketch in the duster in the back. That's where the collar comes in. Again, use some gray paint if you need to help iron out some things. Alright, I'm bringing back the white paint to the hair now, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but you can see I'm just trying to use that to help connect that collar there and figure that out. Heading over to the gun here, we're going to do the top of the barrel. First line about parallel to the legs. Second one, you want to angle it away, kind of think of a triangle. Top little curve there to connect them. Again, think of a triangle for each side, but then a rounded bottom curve. We'll reestablish those and throw some gray in between. Alright, I'm going to get the side of the gun there. Again, we kind of want to wedge that, so you can see I'm tightening up. So it kind of looks like it's coming at you, again, foreshortening. Alright, perspective. I'm going to bring down that bottom part of the face of the gun there. And we'll start kind of adding these little pieces. You can see I curved up and around. I'm going to bring down here. It's about an inch or so from the edge of the hand there. We'll get the back of the gun and the bottom edge there. It's going to kind of cut back in. Alright. I'll go ahead and try to form the trigger of the gun here. Bring some lines down. Now the handle's going to be hidden from the hands, but it's good to draw a line there to kind of help place the fingers. So I went ahead and brought an angle down and connected the bottom of the hand where the pinky will be to the bottom of the gun there. Jumping back up and add any little touches here using some gray to iron things out. See that I got the blazer separated from the duster. Go up to the jaw line, clean that up some using gray to help shave angles and white paint to reestablish. Going back up to the hair and really getting that signature kind of mop top going. Alright. As far as the leg goes, we may end up raising it up a little bit. But remember, we can always use our gray there. Finish in the back of the blazer, the bottom of the blazer that is. And then we're going to jump over here, bottom of the duster, so we can get it to connect. Alright, up to the jawline. We're going to start using our black paint now. We're going to kind of start reestablishing some of these lines, as well as placing more detail in it as we go. Alright, again, we can still use our round at number 1 or number 2 here, but we're going to switch to the black paint. Most of the white paint should be dry. So I'm kind of just outlining here. I'm going to the arm, going to the edge of the collar there. Now he's got a yellow collar underneath his duster's collar, so you'll see once I reestablish that line here. Actually shortening the back of the collar as it goes around the neck there. Adding the front flap of that duster. Now we're bringing down the side of the blazer, angling in it, and the other side of the blazer. Think of like a real big blazer cuff going across, that nice wedge there in the front. And we'll kind of, scribble in there and kind of get an idea of where we want the tie, but if you don't get it right away, it's okay. Going down and bringing down the front of the blazer and the little overlap there, where it bends in front of, like where there would be a belt, but it kind of goes down. Some kind of like ambassador jacket. Here's the tie here. We kind of want to angle it out and down as it's like kind of flowing out. Or over and get this arm over here. Add a little scribble bend where the elbow would be at, the inner elbow. Reestablish some of those curved lines that kind of overlap each other there on the arm. It adds a nice folding effect and really adds to the foreshortening of the layers of perspective. Go ahead and rebuild this leg here again. Add some squiggly lines for bends in fabric. All right. Clean up if you need to. I'm actually gonna make his calf a little skinnier. He's got thinner legs, so just bring that same kind of line and technique just inward a little bit. Bring that leg down as well, and use darker lines if you need to. You can always use gray to help iron things out. Use this time to really refine your figure and the shapes that you're using. Think of it as almost sculpting with the paint here. All right, that's what's nice about using that gray. Kind of map out the hands here. Checking out my own hands. If you need to, we can bring in the guns. The gun inside of the gun and finger will help. Make sure that you angle back the knuckle back towards the angle of the arm, so that finger goes around and down around the trigger. Alright, so we got that trigger there. Finger's gonna go angled with the angle of the trigger, angle with the angle of the gun, and then the knuckle will cut in towards the forearm. Repeat it underneath, and then repeat it again for that third finger. And then again for where the pinky's at. Now you can use thicker brush strokes, add more pressure to your paintbrush when you're getting the in-betweens of the finger, because it'll add some nice shadow to that later. But you can jump up and add some light sketching to the gun as well. Add little sights there. I won't draw like the muzzle of the gun too defined yet, but or the barrel I should say. We're just defining lines. We got little cutouts here. As I zoom in, you can see what I'm kind of building out of the side of the gun, kind of make it more substantial. It's not just a tube in the hand, you know, a little more believable now. Darkening those wedges, using gray if I need to clean things up. Make those angles believable at a nice perspective. Alright, if you need to use a ruler for any of your lines, you can. I'm going to jump up and grab the other side of that gun and the top part of the sights. I'm going to widen out that forearm a little bit, kind of fan it out to the edge of that wrist, so it all kind of shoots in and angles to the back of the elbow there. Reestablish some line work with the trigger. Again, gray paint is your friend here. Use it as an eraser. Alright, so now since we have the gun sketched out, about a ½ inch sticking out under his hand there, we can go over to his face and get his nose. Nose is going to be a long down line with a quick little point flip. Nice big mouth, little dot for the nostril, and a little line underneath for the lip. His eyes, you want to angle them in towards that nose. Quick little down swoop and back in towards the bottom of the eyebrow. Take the other eyebrow to where the edge of the head meets the top of the hair, or the bottom of the hair I should say. Speaking of hair, go ahead and make sure you add nice little flips to your strokes. We're definitely still using our small brush here. If you need to switch to just that one to make sure you get a nice thin line, you can. But as we established that, we're just gonna kind of make that nice mop top. Alright, reestablishing some of the duster there. Can't forget about the tie of the duster. Quick little line up. It helps kind of bring some of the waviness of the piece together. We'll get that shoe. Shoe's a little off camera, but it'll work just fine. He's also got some little straps here on his blazer, so we'll add those two little tabs. Alright, I think that's pretty good for a sketch, guys. Now, if you need to at this point, you can still clean up some things. Use your gray paint to just tighten up anything. Your figure's not, really working well, or maybe you want to add a little more detail to your gun on your own. Regardless, use this time to just really clean up your piece, reestablish some things. You see here, I'm reestablishing that leg a little bit, making it go up just a little higher. This is your time to go back and rearrange some things if you need to. Paint out spots of too much white paint, or clean up spots that you're waiting to dry earlier. Reestablish inner lines like that, make lines darker. But use this time to let things kind of meld together. Just keep using your gray. Look, I'll even throw the little barrel down there. We'll throw it in for now. Forget about it. Again, ultimately this is the piece you're going to walk away with, so use this time. Be sure to pause this video if you need to at any point to really see any little details. But we'll be reestablishing line work again later, but we wanted, since this piece is more so about the figure, really wanted to establish the shapes and areas we're going to fill in here, make things a lot easier, and it'll ultimately make the time more enjoyable, since we spent the time to really sketch out this piece and make it look good and get the anatomy right with the right foreshortening. You know what? I think it's ready to go for some color. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to step 2 now. All right, so for step 2, we're gonna go ahead and paint the skin tone. Go ahead and take 2 scoops of white paint with your big brush and 1 scoop of brown, the dab of orange to get that skin color. You can use your big brush at first to paint that big hand. Since you just paint it in like you're filling in the blocks, keep those little black lines thick between the fingers, and then switch to your flat number 5 if you need to get the hands up there. I'm going to establish some fingers up here as well. Remember, fingers in the distance, you just want to use 1 brush stroke per finger. And then use one of your smaller brushes here too to paint the inside of his face. Now, there's not a lot of skin exposure here with Spike, so there's not going to be a lot of ground cover with that. So just be very mindful of how you fill in the face there, leaving your lines from before. Again, you always can come back and reestablish them, so don't dread it if you paint over them, but ultimately we'll be all right. You can go ahead and get the neck up to the chest as well, and then clean up any little areas if you want. All right. Here I'm just kind of reestablishing the line of his chest, so if you wanted to do that too, you can. If you ever see anything you need to adjust as you go ahead and do it, all right? But now we're going to go ahead and get ready to fill in his hair. So for his hair here, go ahead and make sure your brushes are nice and clean, all right? And you're going to take your big brush again. It's always good to mix that big brush, but mix a scoop of green and a dab of black paint to get a nice dark green. Go ahead and use one of your smaller brushes and fill in the top of his hair. All right. Again, take your time and fill in the top with that green, and then go ahead and switch with a clean brush, small brush, the bottom half of his hair, the bangs that is, with the black paint. And then we'll brush up into that green hair with some nice little sharp curly angles, similar to how his hair is, to have some nice shadow in his hair. All right, it's kind of two-tone, and we'll come back and add some fresh coats to it later. But we also want to jump down and add some color to the eyes for now. So not only can we add the whites of the eyes, we go ahead and add the little red brown of the eyes too. Now, this is probably really the only use of red we have for this whole piece, but go ahead and mix a dab of brown and a dab of red. You don't need much. And just fill in his irises, fill the whites of his eyes with a clean brush, small brush, and you can go ahead and add black for the pupils. I'm zooming in here for you, as well as little dashes for the glares on the eyes there. All right. And if you want, you can go over here and establish the ear with some black paint if you haven't yet. Just follow along there. I got it zoomed in for you. All right. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to step 4 here. All right. Start messing with the clothes. So the blazer, his typical kind of tealish, dark tealish blue blazer. I'm gonna mix that together, so make sure your big brush is clean. Go ahead and grab 2 scoops of blue, a scoop of black paint, and a dab of white paint. All right. We'll go with the darker blue first on his blazer. Go ahead and use one of your smaller brushes. I'm using the flat 10 here, and then you can always switch to one of your rounds if you need to get to a tight spot. You can see I'm leaving some areas open around some of the darker lines, especially with this darker blue, because the black lines early on could get lost. So I'm leaving a little edges of gray just to help keep things separated, all right? We're just blackening color right now. That's these next few steps in general. We're just blackening our first layer of color before we start coming back in and adding highlights and shadows. As far as the blazer's color goes, to be lighter, go ahead and add another scoop of blue and a scoop of white, plus a dab of green to what you had left over from the blazer earlier. All right. Mix those together, and then paint that with the flat 5 brush to get tight areas, as well as the little bitty buttons there. Okay. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the shirt and the rest of his outfit here. So for the shirt, it's yellow. Make sure your brushes are clean. We're going to grab just a scoop of white with a dab of yellow, so a nice light yellow, and fill in the different angles and wedges of this shirt here. Alright, back around the edge of the jawline, so you can kind of establish that more. Back around his neck. That one's going to be kind of a line that just follows the collar of the duster. Fill that in, and then we can always kind of reestablish the tie if we need to at this point. Alright, that's just using black paint. You can add a little bit of blue if you want, but again, just kind of use it as a divider from the blazer and the yellow shirt there. Kind of angle them with the same as the blazer. Alright, just adding that tie there. But as the outfit gets kind of pulled together, we're going to start thinking about what we want to do for our background here as well soon. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the duster here. Taking your large brush, grab a scoop of brown with a half scoop of black paint and a dab of blue. Go ahead and mix those together. You can also take a little dab of white paint too if you need to lighten it up a little bit. And go ahead and just fill that in. I'll prefer using a flat tin here, as well as your flat 5 to get into the tight areas. But just blocking this in, it's going to help blocking the color more. Remember that little tip about leaving some of the gray around your black lines there. That way they stand out more, and we can go back and reestablish them and know where those bends on the fabric is. Alright. But you can go ahead and get behind the collar there. Again, use your smaller brush to kind of tighten up some things if you need to. You can see I still have some of that white paint showing in between to keep layers in between. That way I'm good to go once I start adding another layer of outline. Alright, but we're going to go ahead and move on to the background now. Alright. Oh yeah, don't forget, if you want, you can go ahead and throw some blue, the blue from your clothes, onto that shoe there. Let's go ahead and darken that in. Now, for the background, I'm going to go ahead and mix together 2 scoops of blue paint, a scoop of green paint, as well as a scoop of your teal paint. Then you can also add a half scoop of black paint and a half scoop of white. I know that's a lot, but it's going to add that nice teal color, and it's going to really separate from the rest of his outfit colors. Now the teal is that light aqua green that we have. Alright, so go ahead and use your big brush and block in that color. Be sure to add water to your paint as you go as well. That way it goes on nice and smooth for you. And then switch to one of your smaller brushes, flat tin or something, to or one of your rounds, to get in between little areas. Don't worry about being super perfect right here, because we'll come back and add more layers later, but we want to get that background painted in there. Again, be sure to use water if you need to. If you need to mix again, you can always mix in half portions of what I've said there. Just kind of eyeball it and try to reach that same color. Alright, using one of the smaller brushes here, I'm getting behind and around little bits of the hair, just kind of closing things in. But now, since we have all the colors blocked in, we can go ahead and move on to adding shadows and highlights. Speaking of shadows, we're going to add some to the background too. You can darken the corners here by just adding black paint to the mix you already have and blending them into the corners. You can see that I have the top right corner and the bottom left corner thicker than the top left and bottom right. It's kind of almost angling. It's going at the same kind of angle. It's almost in that oval egg shape you can see there, with the angle spikes kind of leaning back there. Think about like a spotlight on them. Alright, so I'm just darkening the corners, and then I can use that same background blue to blend up and into the corners as I go. If you want, you can even just add pure black paint to the very tips of the corners and paint inward towards the blue. And look, I'm even establishing little bits of the fingers there, the backs of the fingers. But again, if it's a little messy, the background right now, it's alright, you'll be adding another layer later. This is to help us, and it's going to help us really see what we're going for with the next steps, including highlights and shadows and whatnot, because now that everything's colored, pretty much all gray's gone except for the original gray, which is still in the gun, but the gun's going to be one of the final steps here. Just go ahead and clean your brushes and get ready for the second layer zone, because that's where we're headed next here on step 8. And paint the second layer of the hair. Same mix as before, green with a dab of black paint. Go ahead and paint over what you did before. Add a nice second layer there. Reestablish some sharper bits of hair that were covered up by the blue as well, if you need to. Go ahead and add a fresh coat of the black paint underneath the hair too. Alright, add that shadow. Again, reestablishing some of the line works if you need to. Add some hair behind the back of the head towards the neck a little more, help complete that. So it looks really nice. Alright, again, we're just, at this next step, we're reestablishing coats as well as adding highlights and shadows here. You can also go ahead and add a little second coat to the eyes if you want to as well. As far as step 9 goes, we're going to go ahead and paint the second layer of the skin. Again, you can go ahead and add another coat of the same mix as before. Add, kind of tone up some areas. But you can also add a scoop of brown and a half scoop of black paint to that mixture to add the darker tone for the shadows. You can see I just hit the edge of the jaw there, hitting the side of the nose, the left side for us, his right side. A little bit underneath the lip as well, and some up there between the hair locks. I'll keep up with the trend here and add shadows here to the left side of the hand, removing some for highlights, and then jump up there and hitting that back side of the hand in the distance. Alright, moving on to the blazer here, the blue part. Go ahead and mix together the same mix as before, so you can add a fresh coat. And then go ahead and split some of that mix up and add half a scoop of white paint to that so we can add some highlights to this as well. So again, I believe the mix was a scoop of blue, scoop of black, and a half of white. Go ahead and reestablish that and add a nice fresh coat. You can see it really goes on nice now. Be sure you use your flat 5 to get in there and jump over to any of your round brushes if you need to get into the tight areas. You can see I'm still leaving some areas around those original outlines, that way I know where to put my ones later. But then as far as that highlight, I can bring some over there on that left side for us, his right. Just kind of blending it in while that blue's still wet there. Over there on the front right side of the leg, a little bit underneath the leg. And front right side of that leg too, by the crotch as well. Alright, and now you see that we're using the dark blue as the shadow of his blazer and pants. Again, at this point you can use your small brush to help clean up some areas. You can make areas brighter, bring in the highlight more, or use that darker blue to continue to add some shadows. But we can also paint some shadow on the yellow part of the shirt too. Let's go ahead and wrap this with step 10. Add your, get your yellow mixed together with 1 scoop of white, a half scoop of yellow, and a half scoop of black paint. That way you can add the darker part. Be sure to paint that underneath the tie, and just a little bit on the other edge of the shirt. There's not much here, but it's going to add the shadow under the tie so it looks like it's floating, and just a little tad on the edge of the collar behind the neck. Alright, so I guess now we're going to go ahead and move on to the outline before we go ahead and paint the duster. That way we can reestablish everything. Alright, so at this point you can go ahead and grab one of your smaller brushes, preferably one of the rounds, just some black paint and some water to thin it out. We're going to start with the top of the hair, and at this point, like I said, we're just going to reestablish outlines, alright, make things sharper, so when we get to our final little coats of everything, everything's kind of in order. Reestablishing the jawline here, alright, as well as the eyes and the eyebrows, cleaning those up because some of it was lost with the skin tone, especially the shadow, as well as the ear and the back of the collar and the hair up to the neck. Alright, and the reason we're doing this outline before we do the duster as well, because you can see the duster is kind of all blended together. So before I start adding highlights and more to the blaze, or the duster I should say, I'm going to go ahead and reestablish some line work on it. That goes the same for the collar of the shirt and the blazer. Just reestablish those lines, making those tight. It'll be really nice now for the blazer to have some extra line work because it'll help bring out all of the bends and folds in the fabric. Speaking of that, we're on the bends and folds of the fabric of the leather duster here. You can see how each layer overlaps each other. Think about like fish scales as it gets closer and closer to where his wrist is at. Reestablish some darker lines there for the knuckles. Again, I mentioned that earlier. It's adding some more shadows deeper where the hand's connecting. Alright, I'm adding a little bit to the gun here, but I don't want to get too carried away because we're going to go back to the gun in a little bit and really add some detail to it and reestablish lines. Since I'm stopping by the gun and around, kind of doing my go around here, I might as well clean up some of the line work as we go. I'll jump back here, clean up the line work for the folds and ripples of the belly zone of the blazer, as well as the top of the leg there. A little part where it folds in. Some lines and folds on the inner part of the leg too. You can see how I used those highlights earlier to help add some of those folds for myself. I can really kind of start cleaning up the edge of that arm as well, and these fingers. And this is where I'm zooming for you. You can see how I went in there and added the fingers and brought them out individually now with that second outline. Alright, so moving on to this duster second layer, we'll go ahead and reestablish the color on it, and as well as some highlights. So for the highlights, you're going to use that same mix for the duster, but you're going to add some white to that for the highlights. Alright, and you're going to increase that white paint to get brighter areas as you go. You can see I'm hitting the right front sides of his duster here, using that small 10. I know it's moving a little quick, but we can always go back and look at it. But you want to keep that original dark brown in the background there. Alright, and then you can go ahead and with that mix go back and reestablish and clean up that part. Now since you left it there, it gives you a path to follow. Alright, like between the leg here and in front of the leg as well. We'll just start separating the light part of the jacket from the dark part. Alright, it's looking so nice here, so cleaned up. But like I said earlier, with incremental white paint to the light mix, you're going to go ahead and add a little bit more white now, more than you did before. And what that's ultimately going to do is give you a super bright highlight for the leather. And we always want that on some kind of leather coats and jackets to really add kind of the flare there. But you can see as I'm just adding it just on the right edges of some of those folds. Follow those folds, use it like that. A little bit tip on that collar of the blazer or the duster, and a little bit on the top edge of the tie for the duster, that is, not of his outfit, of course. But again, we reestablished the brown color. We added the white to it, a little bit of white, so we can make it brighter for the highlights, and we added even more white for the extreme highlights on it, the extra shiny parts of the blazer. Alright, go ahead and clean your brushes, because we're going to get ready to move on to extra cleanup, touch-up that is. So at this point we can go back and clean up areas around the hair, clean up areas around the figure, the hands, the duster, the blazer. Don't worry about the gun so much, but any of those spots you feel like you need to fill in with paint. Like you can see, there's white over down by his leg. There's some other dirty spots where I can fill in, and also reusing the black paint to again reestablish more outlines. Say if you miss them or mess them up, you can take this time to really just kind of clean things up. So as we're moving closer here, we only got 2 steps after this one. We're going to do the gun, and we're going to reestablish the background. Okay, so again here I'm just really taking my time before I jump to the gun to kind of really finish off any little bits and pieces I need to make this thing believable. Going back down and reblending the hands a little bit so those lines of highlights on the knuckles aren't so stark. I can reestablish more shadow if I need to. I can go ahead and add extra little shadows that I may have forgot for the collar of the blazer. Alright, you can reestablish fold lines. If some part doesn't seem clean enough for you, you can kind of just sit there and bounce back and forth. Again, with acrylic paints, they always dry, so you can just take your time and come back and after get some fresh eyes and see what you need to fix. Alright, there's always rooms for adjustment, and as you go, you see that you can't really ever make a mistake because you can always just fix it or move on or add something over or hide it or whatever. So be sure to just use this time to figure those things out, to figure out what you're missing, what you want to add, what you want to reestablish, where you missed some color at, where you can make lines thicker, add more weight, especially as they get closer to you. Again, this is your time to kind of clean things up now, so we don't get to the last step and then you feel like you're done, but then you look at it later and like, wait, I wish I would have did this. Use that time now for you wish you would have did this before we get to because the gun's going to be its own beast. Same thing with the background. All right, but speaking of that, let's go ahead and move on to the gun, shall we? Because we are on step 14. So we're going to paint this pistol here. Again, we want to reestablish color in it now and reestablish some outline. So for the darker gray, go ahead and mix a scoop of black paint, a scoop of white, and just a dab of blue paint. And fill in the left faces of the gun there, the left sides, as well as down below, and angle that shadow. Getting in all between the little sides and edges and little pieces of the gun. You can even mix together a little bit lighter mix, add like a half scoop of white to that with a lighter metal. Now we'll even add more white to get even a lighter metal for the gun, but you can see the two tones we're using right now. We got kind of a medium gray and a darker gray. So for a lighter metal color, real light gray, we'll use that to start establishing the ring around the barrel. You can use the black paint to paint the inner circle of the barrel to give it some depth as it's going in. And at this point too, I'm using some of my black paint and a small brush to add some extra outlines on things and reestablish things. So you can see here as I'm bringing down the lines to meet the sights from the other sides up there, edge of the sides. We're establishing the barrel, the wedge shape of the extra little compartment or side part of the gun. As I zoom in here, you can see what I'm doing. I'm adding these thin lines. I'm actually taking this reference from a famous shot of Spike with his pistol from one of the movies. So I'm kind of using that as a reference here. He's just holding it a different way is all. But again, use this time to reestablish these lines here. You can always bring back your lighter or darker grays to fill in any gaps between the lines that you use to chisel out the form. You can see here, perfect example, reshaping this little bit of wedge. Now you can also add just some black paint and kind of water it down to add little darker areas of those dark edges of the gun. Hence what I did there, kind of blended it into the dark gray. Jumping back into my small brush for some outlines here. Getting the round edge of that barrel with the inner round edge, and then some lines extending out from the black hole of the barrel as the inner working of the barrel there. Now establishing these little bitty micro pieces on the sights as well as the back edge area, and then we can just clean off one of the small brushes and just use white paint to add those real fine sharp highlights on the edge of the gun where the metal bends and folds at, from the barrel to the edge to the trigger. We're just using little bits of white paint to help bring out the little bitty pieces and parts, all the little metal pieces and parts of the gun. So moving on to step 15 here, final step, we're just going to reestablish the background. Same mix as before. Go ahead and take your big brush and paint a nice fresh coat, getting close to those corners as you can. Using one of the smaller brushes, flat 5 or one of the rounds to get in between areas, around the shoe and whatnot. Speaking of shoe, you can always jump back and add some highlights to that too. I think I may have skipped that, but there's not a lot of detail on the shoe there. Reestablish your corners again with the darker blue. Be a little heavy if you needed to now, because you can always go back with that original background teal and fade up and into those corners. And again, always use a little bit of black paint if you need to make those corners darker. At this point, I'm just using my smaller brush to kind of really get around the edges. Make sure all the blues is, for the most part, pretty cohesive. A lot of harmony to the piece here, really cleaning up things. And then also taking any little bits that I need to do to kind of fix up, reestablish some more lines again. You can never stop reestablishing lines in parts of your painting. As you go, you can always adjust. Again, that's the beauty of it. And the beauty of these YouTube videos is you can always pause them and see what's going on here. But yeah, guys, as you clean up and figure out what you're missing here, that's it. There's your masterpiece. Your Spike Spiegel, your space cowboy. And hey, we did it together, you guys. Man, doesn't that look dope? Well, I had a great time with you guys. I hope you did as well. Be sure to share your final piece with me on Twitter or Instagram, PanNerdia both. You can actually watch me paint these live over at twitch.tv/PanNerdia. And be looking out for the next one coming down the drain. Like I said, I'm not sure what it's going to be. Some along dunes, some with landscapes, who knows? But till then, see you, Space Cowboy. Peace.